0400 hours, Strait of Hormuz. Electronic noise floods the airwaves. Radar returns blur into static. 10 Japan-linked vessels move without escort. 4 months earlier, that same waterway had gone silent for Japanese shipping entirely. On March 1, 2026, 3 of Japan's largest carriers, NYK Line, Mitsui OSK Lines, and K Line, suspend every transit through Hormuz. The same day, Iranian maritime authorities notify Mitsui directly. Commercial vessels face a complete ban. 44 Japan-linked ships, tankers, and LNG carriers among them sit frozen inside the Persian Gulf. No clear exit, no timeline. Just 20% of the planet's daily oil and gas supply, stuck behind a closed door. Here's the question worth asking. If the strait stayed sealed for 4 months, how did 10 Japan-linked vessels, including 6 fully loaded supertankers, get out on July 6, 2026, without a single coalition warship in sight? The answer involves a toll booth that isn't on any official chart, a fire off the coast of Oman, and a fracture in how the world's merchant fleets now choose to survive. Japan depends on the Middle East for 90% of its crude oil. That single number explains why a shipping suspension in a gulf 6,000 miles away registers as a national emergency in Tokyo rather than a regional footnote. Hormuz carries 1/5 of global crude and LNG on a normal day. Block it, and Japan doesn't lose a supplier. It loses its primary artery. The country holds 254 days of strategic petroleum reserves, so the lights don't go out tomorrow. But reserves are a countdown, not a solution, and every week the strait stays closed shortens that countdown by exactly 1 week. Hitoshi Nagasawa, president of the Japanese Shipowners Association, convenes an emergency meeting in Tokyo within days of the suspension. 24 Japanese crew members sit trapped inside a live conflict zone, aboard vessels that cannot move without risking seizure or worse. The math is unforgiving. 44 ships, millions of barrels of cargo, and a workforce that didn't sign up to be a diplomatic bargaining chip. Nagasawa's meeting produces no immediate exit route. It produces something more valuable: pressure, applied quietly, through channels that don't show up on a news ticker. And that pressure sets the stage for a workaround nobody had used before. The workaround gets a nickname among traders and analysts: the Tehran toll booth. It's an Iranian-approved corridor running near Larak Island, deep inside waters Iran controls without dispute. Ships that follow its exact routing instructions, at the exact speed and heading Iranian maritime authorities specify, get permission to pass. Ships that deviate don't. In April 2026, the Panama-flagged Sohar Lengi becomes a test case for overall transit safety, though it avoids the Iranian corridor entirely by hugging the southern Omani coastline. Its crew maintains strict radio silence for the entire transit, because silence, in this corridor, reads as compliance. The vessel clears the strait. It's the first confirmed transit of the blockade, and it proves the toll booth works, at least for the tanker willing to play by rules nobody wrote down officially. That single successful transit changes the calculation for every shipowner still trapped in the Gulf. If one LNG carrier can thread Iranian waters without incident, then a fleet can too. But no shipping company wants to be the second test case in a war zone, so operators sit on that knowledge for weeks, quietly negotiating clearance for larger, higher-value cargo, which is exactly what breaks open at the start of July. On July 6, 2026, Lelseg shipping data confirms the exit of 10 Japan-linked vessels from the Persian Gulf in a single coordinated movement. The fleet includes 6 very large crude carriers, 2 chemical tankers, 1 vehicle carrier, and 1 container ship. Together, the 6 VLCCs alone carry 12 million barrels of crude, oil that had been loaded back in late February and early March, sitting idle in tank compartments for over 4 months, while diplomats and shipowners negotiated a way out. 12 million barrels is enough crude to fill roughly 800 Olympic swimming pools, cargo that generated zero revenue for 4 straight months simply because it had nowhere safe to go. Mitsui OSK Line's captains follow the northern corridor near Larak Island precisely, executing the Iranian routing instructions vessel by vessel. There's no coalition escort in this convoy. No U.S. Navy destroyer running picket duty alongside them. Lelseg and Kepler tracking data confirm it. These tankers move through Iranian-controlled water on Iranian terms, not American ones. That detail matters, because it means the resolution to Japan's 4-month bottleneck didn't come from a show of Western naval force. It came from a diplomatically negotiated de-escalation agreement, the Islamabad MOU, signed between Washington and Tehran. For a moment, the story reads like resolution. 7 ships out, 12 million barrels moving again, a 4-month crisis finally clearing. Then, on July 7, 2026, one day after that convoy clears the strait, a projectile strikes the laden Qatari LNG carrier Al Rekayat, 8 nautical miles east of Lima, Oman. The strike triggers a fire aboard the vessel and disrupts the maritime corridor that ships had just begun to trust again. No maritime security agency has officially identified the source of that projectile. What's confirmed is simpler and more unsettling. A fully loaded LNG carrier, carrying cargo capable of igniting catastrophically, takes a hit less than 24 hours after the region appeared to be stabilizing. The timing forces a question nobody can avoid. Does the Al Rekayat incident represent an isolated event, or does it signal that the fragile de-escalation underpinning US-Iran talks is already cracking? Shipowners don't wait for an official answer. They vote with their routing decisions, and the numbers tell their own story. Kpler tracking data from July 2026 shows 2/3 of all merchant vessels transiting the region now choose the northern Iranian-approved route, the same corridor near Larak Island that was tested days earlier. Dozens of vessels run the Omani route with transponders active. 3 ships, broadcasting their position openly, betting on American oversight. The rest, dozens of them, choose Iranian permission over American protection. That's not a neutral logistics decision. It's a referendum on which power actually controls safe passage through the world's most important choke point. And right now, the merchant fleet's answer isn't the one Washington would prefer. Consider what that split means mechanically. The Omani corridor exists because the US Navy maintains a presence capable of monitoring and, in theory, protecting transponder-active vessels along it. It's the visible option, the one built on deterrence. The Iranian corridor near Larak Island exists because Tehran controls the water outright and grants passage on its own terms. No deterrence required, only compliance. A shipowner choosing the northern route isn't necessarily choosing sides in some geopolitical contest. They're choosing the option that got a fleet of 10 vessels and 12 million barrels out safely, against the option that, one day after that success, saw an LNG carrier take a hit within sight of its own protected lane. That's the paradox sitting at the center of this crisis. The safer route, on paper, is the one nobody uses. The riskier route, controlled by the same authority that closed the strait in the first place, is the one moving 2/3 of regional shipping. Billion-dollar naval deterrence competes against a permission slip from Tehran, and right now, the permission slip is winning the market. The geopolitical consequences extend beyond shipping logistics. Every VLCC that clears Hormuz via the Iranian corridor represents an implicit acknowledgement, made not by governments but by insurers, brokers, and ship captains, that safe passage currently runs through Tehran's authority rather than Washington's presence. That's a quiet transfer of practical leverage over 1/5 of the world's energy trade, achieved without a single treaty signed or press conference held. Diplomats can debate who controls the region. Traders already answered the question with their routing software. Meanwhile, Japan's calculation shifts too. Getting 10 vessels and 12 million barrels home doesn't end the country's exposure, it just proves the exposure is survivable under narrow conditions. 90% of crude imports still flow through a strait where safe transit depends on following instructions issued by the same authority that shut the door in March. 254 days of reserves buys patience, not independence. If the Al Rekayat incident repeats, or escalates, the same corridor that just saved a Japanese fleet could close again with far less warning than it did the first time. The tactical lesson here isn't about missiles or radar or electronic warfare arrays. It's about routing. A fleet that moves in coordinated silence, follows exact instructions, and avoids the corridor everyone assumes is protected, can clear a blockade that diplomatic pressure and indirect talks had already officially unlocked weeks earlier. Meanwhile, a single unidentified projectile, fired at one gas carrier 8 nautical miles off a coastline, can undo the fragile confidence that diplomatic negotiations and the exit of the first major convoys had only begun to rebuild. 12 million barrels made it out. One fire one day later reminded everyone watching exactly how temporary that outcome might be.